Hello, everyone. This is Leonna Abraham Brandao, Blog Talk Radio, shedding light. We have on with us Leonna Brandao, and we have on with us Esther. Esther is out from Nigeria, and she is a volunteer with the organization, and she is also one that is working with us as a co-host on Blog Talk Radio, shedding light. We're going to be talking today about the injustices, as we always do, in the prisons in the United States. And prisoners are caught up in a system of injustices. Individuals once respected as a role model to others, now serving the harshest of punishments, life and life without parole. Where is the help? Where is the help? We often wonder, where do these prisoners turn to when they cannot get any help from any lawyers or any politicians or anyone? We have so many high rates of suicides in the United States of America. We have harsh sentencing, life and life without parole for first-time offenders, and also for wrongful convicted. We have life and life without parole for simple things as maybe drug, but mostly people who have mental illnesses and addictions who are incarcerated, and that is the problem we have in the United States of America. We have an epidemic of mental illnesses and addictions. And unfortunately, we're living in a country now where everyone is so focused on money, on power, on fame. There's so much corruption going on in the communities and in the prison systems. There's so many lies and deprivations, deceit. It all needs to stop, and the focus needs to be refocused on mental health issues and on addictions. Many advocates around the country now are saying defund the Department of Corrections, defund DOC, and use that money to establish more mental health institutions. Because years ago, they closed down all the mental institutions in the state of Massachusetts, all the way to California, and the entire nation. They closed down these mental institutions, and they started using prisons as an alternative to house these incarcerated individuals who are now incarcerated, who have psychological problems and also addictions. No one ever looks at the causes of these mental illnesses or addictions. No one ever looks at the possibility that many of these people incarcerated were victims before becoming offenders. And I know many of you have heard me speak on these issues in the past in another radio podcast. But the reason I keep bringing this up is because it needs to be addressed. And the people that have influential leadership in this country cannot see that. You know, there's many people that go to school, they go to universities, they go to colleges, and they get that piece of paper. But they don't learn everything about everything. And as I mentioned before, as a social worker for 45 years, when I went to school for social work, they taught about social work. They talk about the needs for families to be stable because we have so many dysfunctional families. Something they didn't talk about. They don't talk about cultures because we have cultures throughout the globe, throughout this planet, various cultures, all different cultures, and people discipline differently. They think differently. So we have these people who get that piece of paper as a social worker, who have never been married, who have no children, who have no knowledge of cultures, who have no concerns because most of them come from prominent backgrounds. So what happens is they go into these homes, of these dysfunctional homes, and they start demanding that these people, whether it be a single parent or a two-parent home, they start demanding that they go for counseling, that they do this and they do that. Never tell someone they have to do anything, because then the families get resistant and they don't want to work with that particular or any social worker that's going to come on as a threat to them. So the next thing you know, the social worker is going to be speaking with their supervisors. Their supervisors are going to agree that if they don't do this, this, and this, that they're going to have to place those children in foster care. Let's look at foster homes. There are so many good foster parents out there. However, there are also foster parents that are just in it for the money and not for the concern of these children or adolescents. So once these kids get placed in foster homes, you hear it all the time throughout the country. A lot of these children are either abused or they're violated in some other way or they die in foster care. Had these social workers been more informed on how to interact with people that they're working with, many children could have been saved. Many children. And I'll tell you, there's people in this entire country, everyone has problems, not only in the country, in other countries as well. People have problems. There's no homes that are completely perfect. But many people from prominent backgrounds, or even the average citizen, their pride gets in the way. And they don't want to talk about their issues. They hide everything under the carpet, in the closet. Yet when they're working with their clients, it's a different story. They're coming off as being perfect, and their clients have to abide by what they want them to do, or else. As a social worker, I myself have had issues throughout the years in the past, and I would share some of them with my clients because this way the client knows they can trust their social worker if their social worker is also sharing. But the difference being, some of us had those same similar problems. However, we overcame and we're able to show and demonstrate with our clients how to overcome. Now, in the prisons, we have people incarcerated who were violated as children, who were in domestic violent homes, children who never stood a chance. They grew up in the ghettos of New York or Boston or other places. Yet, they grew up and many of them turned out well. Many of them followed suit from their past, their roots. They got into drinking as their mother or father or both did, or drugs. They had a lot of anger because it never got addressed properly. And there's no role models anymore for these young people. So who do they turn to? But others like themselves, which subsequently end up with gang memberships. And instead of using the gang memberships to do some things positive, these are all kids that are so distraught, so angry because no one has been there for them, that they do just the opposite of good, end up in prison. Then there's a lot of them, people that end up drinking because they came from such a dysfunctional home of alcoholism or drugs, so they ended up getting addicted. There's many who take their anger out or their frustration out from the abuses they went through by getting into the gym, pumping, as they say, lifting weights and doing all these heavy duty exercises to strengthen them so that no one can ever hurt them again. Until someday they may get into a relationship or they may have something happen to them where that resilience is no longer there. And when that resilience is gone, it leaves no energy, no strength, spiritually, physically, or mentally. And that's when we start seeing downfalls. That's when we start seeing the stumbling of God's children, regardless of age, gender, race, or religion. And this is what's happening. This is what's happening in the prisons today. For many of these people that ended up in prison, they unfortunately, the suffering didn't stop there. It continues to go on. And that's what's happening in our prison system today. Many prisoners are being abused. Same thing as they were when they were children, they're now facing it again. Abuses, deprivations, provocations, civil rights, human rights violations. And when when the legislative members are informed about these issues, we always hear them say, well, you know, you have to go to your state rep in your region or your district. I am so sick of hearing politicians say you have to go to your district, to your politician in your district, because it's not in one district. The problem is nationwide. The problem is all over the country. And unfortunately, when someone's having severe mental or psychological problems or addictions, they can they can damage someone else. They can damage someone else's children. And unfortunately, people from prominent backgrounds, from the wealthy, let's talk about the wealthy side. You have these young men and these young women who come from money, who think it's a big joke to get involved with somebody lower, of lower class than them, economically, to get involved with these people, only to play head games. And when these wealthy children cause someone else to get incarcerated or someone else to commit suicide, they get a slap on the hand, if even that. There was one individual, but there's been more since that incident happened. There was one young woman that caused her boyfriend to commit suicide. She encouraged it until it happened. She went to prison for a year. This is how money talks. But yet the boyfriend committed suicide. Now what happens if that was in reverse? If she talked him into suicide and he was so depressed it turned out to be homicide, he would have been in prison for a life or life without parole. This is how dysfunctional our criminal justice system is. This is how dysfunctional our nation is. We have people who are overseeing prisoners, but there's no oversight for the overseers. So what's happening is that these prisoners are being abused. Again, they're being deprived. So much is happening to them. And it's sad because no one is stepping in to see what's going on, to hold anyone overseeing accountable. Someone needs to be held accountable. Someone needs to be held accountable. And they won't be if we keep having our legislative members, our senators saying, you have to go to someone in your district about this particular issue. Because again, it's not just in one district, it's all through the country. What they need to do is these legislative members, these politicians throughout the country, they need to have yearly, if not biannual, they need to have meetings amongst themselves, because even though each state is separate, it's not federal, because the president can pardon people that are in federal prisons. But in state prisons, it goes by the governors. If these governors had their regular meetings around the country together in solidarity to go over these issues, they might all come together and come up with something more stable throughout the country, instead of all these inconsistencies by state. And the same with the legislative members, politicians. This is how you address issues of mental illnesses and addictions. This is how things get done properly. I'm going to go back as a social worker. When they made it mandatory that anyone with children 5 years of age or older would put their kids in daycare and go to work. What they didn't consider was these children, if they were 5 years of age, did the mother have to be at work before the daycare opened? Did she have transportation to get to and from work? Would the child be kept in daycare until she gets off work? These are situations that are very important, because without a car, no one can, especially in areas like, say, Cape Cod, where buses were not like they are in the city. Transportation, if you don't have a car, there's no way you can get to work. If the daycare opens after you get to work, there's no way for you to put your child in that daycare if it's not open before you go to work. That's the same thing with the issues that we have in the streets. We have people in the streets that if they're doing something that's out of the ordinary, the police will say they can't do anything unless that person does something to harm someone. And when that person does do something to harm someone, they don't put him or her in a long-term residential treatment facility. They put them in a prison. It's happened over and over and over and over again. You have these individuals that are serving life and life without parole in prison. Some of them killed their parents or their parent because they were having mental illnesses, but yet they're in a prison. Can you imagine what that person or those people are thinking after they commit such a terrible crime involving their own mother or father? When they think about what happened, we have a whole system of government employees throughout the country. We're paying, our taxpayer dollars are going to them, and yet they don't have it together. You can get someone off the street or in a homeless shelter that has more intelligence and more insight than many of these people in government positions. I remember taking a young lady to to an AA meeting one time, an NA meeting, because she had a drinking problem. And while there, a man spoke about how he himself was a lawyer at one time, but he had a drinking problem. And the more time that went by, the worse it got. And his friend tried to tell him he had a drinking problem. And he stopped bothering with his friend because he didn't want to hear it. He and his wife went shopping one time in a grocery store, and he bought a bottle of vinegar. And his wife was asking him why. He said, we probably will need it sometime. So he got it. She didn't think anything of it. But when she was not around, he put vodka in that bottle. And that is the same thing that he would do in his car with the windshield washer. It would empty out. He would put stuff in there, alcohol in the windshield washer. It was so bad that he was at a bar one time, a club, and he said when he got ready to leave the club, he was so drunk that he opened the wrong door to leave. And he fell down the stairs and came just inches from the boiler. And had he not come just a few inches, he probably would have been deceased and not been talking about his experiences. But he said that's when he realized that he needed help, and he got it. However, in the meantime, with all of the drinking he was doing, he lost his practice, he lost his family, he lost everything. So I want people to know that when you look at these people out in the streets, in the homeless shelters, don't think that they're low class, that they're no good, that they were never anybody, that they don't belong in society, because some of them are the most intelligent individuals. Just like a lot of people probably thought Einstein was crazy, but yet he was a genius. We have people in politics that are so worried about keeping up with their peers, looking good, talking to the media. Look what's happening right now in this country. It's all talk and no action. People and the media invites all these so-called experts who keep saying, I think this and I think that, and I would say this and I believe this, but I'm not sure. We don't need somebody that's doubtful, and we don't need someone that's not really an expert. And just because they have a title, just because there's someone popular with a lot of the majority of wealthy people, doesn't mean that they're intelligent enough or that they have the wisdom to know the difference between right and wrong. We have people incarcerated, men, women, and youth, incarcerated right now that desperately need help. And we need people to know that there's a lot of people incarcerated who have been dying to take programs, to get involved in educational programs, to get involved in other programs. These people want to get out. They don't want to spend the rest of their lives in prison. But yet, the Department of Corrections has a way of making everybody look at prisoners as being hardcore criminals with no hope ever being rehabilitated. But yet they're the very people that are preventing it. The Department of Corrections are the very people who are preventing prisoners from progressing. They try to bring them down. They try to keep them as far behind as they can. They try to make it look like they don't want the programs. They try to make it look like there's no hope for these people. And this is sad because this is what's happening. And I'm going to talk about this one situation again because I've talked about this before. This is a young man that went to prison 35 years ago. Okay, he's been in prison for 35 years. He's tried so hard to take any kind of programs he could get into because prior to going to prison, he himself struggled as a single child, an only child in a single parent home, to go through high school, to go through prep school, and to spend 4 years of college before his breakdown. He was concerned about the way he kept his physical being because he was going for sports medicine, physical therapy. Never involved with drugs, never involved with alcohol. Did everything right from a small town. Sometimes when people from the city come to small towns and they meet these vulnerable men or women, there's trouble because they're coming for a good time. And the person or people that they're coming to meet at their jobs or wherever they might meet them are totally different. Some people, when they have relationships, some people, when they get involved in a relationship, some of them are very serious. They're looking to someday ultimately have a family, be able to have a beautiful family with children and a wife or a husband, while others are just getting into relationships for the fun of it. So they can tell their friends, oh, I got this one, I got that one. You know, they're not serious. It's a, what do they call it? A crush, like it's a child. The heart, there's a very thin line between the heart, between love and hate. And there's too many people in society of wealthier backgrounds that think they can play with the hearts of others less fortunate. And when I say less fortunate, I mean less fortunate economically, but much more above average, spiritually, mentally, and physically. This is what we have in the prisons today. We have people that have been broken down either by their own families, by relationships, or by mental or psychological and or addictive issues. And this is why I say we have to encourage our legislative members, our legislation, to start focusing more on treatment, on oversight, on transparency, because there's no transparency in the prisons. There's no transparency in government anymore. The people in the streets and the people in politics and government are all equal now. Just because somebody wears a suit and a tie and whether they're women or men, wearing a dress or whatever, if they have a title, don't think that at all gives you a higher position than the people in the communities you're dealing with today. Because we see what's going on in government today. We see that some parties have no control over what's happening, and they don't appear to want to get control. Everyone's being quiet, and they're complaining about what's happening. So here we have, just like the people in the communities, we're just as disgusted with a lot of things that happen. But we're not being paid as government officials, legislation, senators, congressmen. We're not in those positions to make those decisions. But if they can't make it, they're no different than any of you. But getting back to the prison system, this is one individual I'm talking about, but there are many, many, many like him. This individual ended up going to prison for one fatal shot 35 years ago. One fatal shot. And since being incarcerated, he has been treated worse than a serial killer would be. He has been deprived every option, every alternative to any kind of programs. He has been kept in solitary confinement so many times because he refuses to double cell. And his reason for being unwilling to double cell is because of the abuses as a child and when first going in. So when in solitary confinement, a lot of these prisoners, and if any of you are advocating for the incarcerated, you can ask them, when incarcerated, many of them, they get hundreds and hundreds of disciplinary reports written up on them, false reports. Again, if legislative members, if senators and House reps were to go into the prisons and meet with these prisoners, they would find out so much that they don't know about. But yet when they do visit the prisons, they don't go to the solitary confinement units. They don't go to the behavioral assessment units. They don't go to these units where they're being kept in the dark. They go to the main blocks. They meet with the prisoners that are doing good. So how do you know, how can you be a politician and know exactly what's going on in the prisons? Is when you're visiting the prisons, you don't go to the main source where the abuses are taking place. And that's what's happening with these prisoners. They're trying to get their story out. They're trying to speak with someone. They're trying to let somebody help them. Who do they turn to? Who do they turn to? And then we have a lot of times, we have some legislative members who are, because they're able to go into the prison and speak with the prisoners and they get comfy with the superintendent or the supervisors or whatever, then all of a sudden they don't want to be on the bad side of the superintendent or supervisors. So what they do is they'll maybe talk to a prisoner or email a politician or email a superintendent, but they don't go right in and meet directly with the prisoner or prisoners. They don't sit with them to find out everything that's going on. They're just trying to show that they're doing a little bit of something to make themselves look good. We have prisoners also who are trying to get some mental health counseling, only to find out that a lot of times the counselors are sharing their information with the correctional officers. So prisoners don't feel they even have there's no confidentiality. They're afraid to talk about what's been hurting them, what's in their hearts, what's in their minds. They're afraid because the system sticks together. In these Department of Corrections, in these prisons, you find a lot of times the mental health workers, the correctional officers, the superintendent, and even in some cases a commissioner, they're all in to bring a person down. In Massachusetts, they closed down 2 prisons. They closed down Walpole Prison, they closed down Concord. So where did all the staff go? Now there's not as much help that's needed because those prisons are closed. Massachusetts is the only state in the United States who has the least incarcerated population, the least. And yet they closed 2 prisons down, and all the staff from both those prisons are somewhere in these prisons left in Massachusetts. For what? Those prisons were running fine without them. Now those 2 prisons that are closed, they're still keeping on the staff. In order to justify why, they have to make it look like the prisoners are much worse and need this extra help. So what do? They try to get them into maximum secure prisons. They try to create extra problems for these prisoners so the prisoners will act out. And if the prisoners don't act out, then they're spending all their time in their cells, not getting fresh air because a lot of these places, they're not letting them outside. There's no programs in some of these maximum secure prisons. Susan Baranowski in Massachusetts is one. They don't have any programs at all. And I'm wondering why the politicians are not asking why they don't have programs in this maximum secure prison. They don't have anything. And unfortunately, we have a government that does not ask questions. We have lawyers that don't ask questions. If a prisoner or prisoners are trying to get help from lawyers, and some lawyers they're in on some kind of conspiracy, they're going to prevent prisoners from getting help from any lawyer. Lawyers stick together just like law enforcement. They call it the brotherhood. And that's BS because brotherhoods can be anywhere. As long as you're in the same level, you're a brotherhood. As a social worker, I used to call social workers one another sister and brotherhoods. But it didn't mean that we would agree when there's wrongdoing, because many of us operated differently. the children in foster homes when I didn't. There was no way I'm going to put a child in a foster home because we don't know what's going to happen in any home that they're in. So what I would do, and I would encourage it for any social worker, is to help these people. If you're going to set up counseling, make sure they get there. If you have to take them yourself, take some time. Take a family, a husband and wife, or a mother and child, whatever. Take them fishing, or go down the beach, or go bowling, or do something with them. Show them that you care. Because once people start feeling good about themselves, they're going to try to do better for themselves. These kids in the high schools, the vocational schools, there's so many dilapidated buildings throughout the country. I know they have them in Boston. I know they have them in New York. Get these vocational schools involved in renovating a lot of these buildings, cleaning up these buildings, building new buildings if they have to. But there's a lot of dilapidated buildings that are just sitting out there, not being used at all. Yet we have a lot of homeless people out there. We have a lot of ex-offenders coming out. Renovate these buildings. Put some time and effort into it. Get these buildings situated so that people that are coming out of prison can have their own rooms, while at the same time they can have counseling going on in the building. They can bring in retired lawyers, retired counselors, retired psychologists and psychiatrists. There's so many volunteers out there. I have an organization and my volunteers are all students. They're all students. Many of them trying to get their internships. Many of them are trying to get their experience. Many want to know more about the problems and the issues. We can help them as well as they help us. We can help them as much as they can help in the communities. But no one thinks about that. They're always looking at the funding, the monies, the grants. Yet they're getting this money, and what are they using it for? If they were using the monies, a lot of these organizations, legal especially, if they were actually helping prisoners instead of collecting all the data, putting all their applications from prisoners and all the documents from prisoners in the storage room so that they have credentials for what they're doing by showing everybody all this paperwork to get their monies, to get their grants, but yet the prisoners are not getting the services they're requesting. And this is where transparency needs to take place. Transparency needs to take place even in law firms, even in legal services. But because there's no transparency, there's no accountability, there's no oversight, we're still going to have these problems. So many problems are happening. There's no resolutions. High rates of suicide, mass prison, and it's going to increase because people are still going to prison. And unfortunately, the large population of people incarcerated are people of color. Although it's gotten to the point now where the abuses and deprivations, provocations, all of these things are happening to all of them. But the incarceration itself, that's what it consists of. The Department of Youth Services, which once upon a time took these at-risk youth who were committing crimes, and they kept them in the Department of Youth Services until they were 18. Now they're putting many people in prison who are 18 in adult prisons. So anytime any of you would like to come on and talk more about these issues, I welcome you to join us. I welcome you to join us because these are ways that we can actually resolve issues throughout the penal system, in the communities, in the homes of others, in the rehabilitation programs, facilities. We need to talk more about these issues, and it's not being talked about. And I'm tired, and I know all of you are tired of watching the news every single day and hearing the same news every single day about the same old thing and no resolutions, no discussions about resolutions. We have people in this country that are out there protesting which protesting to me doesn't do anything, especially when you don't have your government leaders out there with you. Now, for any of you that want to come on the show anytime, want to ask questions, whatever the case may be, please feel free to do so. Now, I'm going to ask Esther. Esther, if you're still on, Esther is an advocate with New Vision Organization. And I wanted to ask Esther because she is not from this country. And Esther, I was wondering if you know anything or could tell us anything about the prison population in your country.
Yes. Hmm. In Nigeria, they can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Okay. In Nigeria, let's say around this early 2026, Nigeria's prison facilities held over 80,000 inmates. So the number of people awaiting for trial is more than double the number of people who have actually been convicted of anything. That means for most people sitting in a Nigerian correctional facility right now, there's no verdict and no sentence. And the overcrowding in the Nigerian correctional.
Okay, you still there, Esther? We may be losing her. She's having a little reception problems here, but yes. I wanted to also let everybody know we're going to have Franz Dow on the radio show with us again. Franz Dow is a former correctional warden from a former warden, 27-year warden from Amsterdam. Franz has been, he's with the United Nations, he's with the International Red Cross, he's with the Ministry of Psychiatry, he's with the Global Ministry of Psychiatry. He's been doing work with some of the advocates in Texas and also in Massachusetts. And Franz is a very interesting individual because he has a different approach, had a different approach to the prisoners in his prison years ago. And I was very impressed when I learned that a lot of those prisoners, and I had some of them on my show in the past years, have been so successful. They have their own businesses, they've written books, they've done a lot. Franz's thought is that, or his philosophy is to treat people like human beings, not by numbers, and not talk to them as though they're below them, but to treat them as human beings and call them by name. And when he calls them by name and they call him by name, they have a good rapport. That's what I call successful providers, whether they be social workers, whether they be wardens, correctional officers, whether they be police officers, whether they be school teachers or counselors or whatever the case may be. You treat people with the same respect that you want, and it says that in the Bible. Treat people with the same respect, and they will treat you back. They will reciprocate. I don't put any title, uniforms, or anything before me. I don't care if I was the President of the United States. I would not put anything before me because I am no different than any of you. And that's the way everybody should think when they are interacting with other people, whether those people are high ranking officers or whether those people are in homeless shelters. People in prison, they've committed their crimes and they're serving their time. They don't need to be abused further. They don't need to be neglected by members of society, especially our government employees. The government, the legislators, they should be out there trying to talk to these prisoners, trying to get to the bottom of how their own prisons in the United States are running, rather than to ignore them completely. And we have Esther back again. So Esther, I am so sorry you're having the trouble with the reception, but if you can pick up where you left off.
Can you hear me?
I was going to ask do they have programs in the prisons in Nigeria, like
Yes.
educational programs and things like that?
Yes. There are programs in the facilities. but they aren't really proficient.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot.
Hello?
Uh,
Yes, yeah,
I
please.
would I would think that there would be other countries like Nigeria and places like that that would have high high rates of incarceration. I would think that it would be mass incarceration in your countries because this is supposed to be a country everybody always brags about as being the blessed, the powerful, and everything else. But yet, if it was that strong, if it was that stable, we would not have mass incarceration in U.S. prisons. We would not have mass incarceration in this country. There's a saying that many people have heard in the past, I'm sure, that before you can look into someone else's yard, you need to look in your own backyard. You need to clean up your own backyard before you can tell others how to do it. And that's what I look at right now with our prison system, with the amount of abuses, the amount of suicides that are going on because there's no oversight. And it's truly, truly a shame that these things have to happen. Truly a shame. But as it stands now, I'm going to end this show because really it's a 45-minute show, but I tried to break it down to a half hour on some occasion and an hour on others. We're still working on the call-in features for the show, so once we get that situated, audience, we will let you know. In the meantime, we have an invite link that we can share so that the next time we have the show, I will put that invite link on Facebook, and anyone that wants to join us can click on that link, and it should bring you right into the studio with us, and you can ask your questions. We also have the chat where people can send in chat messages. And let me see, click on the chat message to display. Okay, right now we don't have anybody on the chat because I haven't sent any links or notified anyone. But please join us. We're going to be having our next show, I believe it's next Wednesday. And until we get everything completely figured out, we will continue to have our Wednesday shows at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I am looking at possibly bringing it down to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but that won't happen for a while. So please join us next Wednesday at 5 p.m. to hear our next podcast. And I hope that all of you will take heed into what you've heard today on this radio show. Look at you. When it says to treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated yourself, we're talking about treating everybody the same way we want to be treated. And if the prison officials and COs and everybody else inside the prison overseeing these prisoners, if they were treated the way they're treating the incarcerated population, I'm sure that they would not be wanting to do it to these prisoners. So I hope that they will consider what it would be like if they were the ones at the other end of the stick getting hurt. Think about it. Audience, we're going to be closing. We're going to be ending this episode now. I thank you all for listening in. Esther, I thank you for joining us as well. And
Thank you
again,
for
I'm sorry I interrupted.
yeah, I said thank you for having me. It was insightful.
Well, thank you so much. I love to hear about other countries because, as I say, people have to learn about the different cultures around the globe. Once we understand cultures, it's much easier to be able to interact. And I think that's why there's so many people, so many countries that are at war because they don't know enough about one another's cultures to understand that we're all alike in so many ways, but we're all different and also in so many ways. In the way we think, the way we run our countries, the way we treat other people. And it's just it's just interesting to learn about the different cultures and how we can interact more appropriately than many are doing right now. But thank you so much, Esther, for coming on, and I hope to speak with you very soon. And audience, we're going to be ending this episode now, and we will be back on next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Thank you all for listening in, and we are now going to end.